This is an introduction and overview of quantitative research design. In quantitative research design, depending on if you have intervention or no intervention in the study, we can look at the research in two different groups. If you have intervention, we can consider it as experimental research. If you don't have intervention, we will consider it as non-experimental research. For experimental research, typically there are three types of experimental research. One is true experimental research, one is quasi-experimental research, and one is single subject experimental research. For the category under non-experimental research, we have descriptive exploratory research, correlational cross-sectional research, prediction analysis, prediction study, and longitudinal studies or time series studies. For true experimental design, this type of research is designed with randomized control and experimental or treatment group. Participants are randomly assigned to either control versus experimental group. However, it's very rare in educational research to design this kind of true experimental research because in educational research, we are dealing with people, human, which there's no way we can control, people's condition to be truly equal to other people. So this kind of true experimental research design is usually more common in biology, science, physics, where researchers can perfectly condition and control the variables so that they can have two truly equal groups. So in educational research, the most often experimental design we have seen is what we call quasi-experimental design, which you still have control and experimental group. However, the selection of participants and formation of the groups are not randomized. It could be the classes that's already been assigned. However, if you are a teacher, you are teaching 4 classes, even though these 4 classes are pre-assigned, sometimes these students may have very different characteristics. So in order for you to design a control and experimental research, you need to have these 2 groups have pretty similar background besides the intervention or variable that you're trying to implement in the study. There, for example, in four of the classes that a teacher teach, there might be 1 gifted track, 1 lower track, 2 kind of regular, has fewer or no kids with special needs. In that case, the 2 regular class might be okay to put together if their prior treatments are pretty similar to begin with. Then it can possibly considered as a control group. Usually in this kind of control experimental groups, post-tests are compared after the intervention is conducted, and you can use independent simple t-test to conduct the statistical analysis to test the significance of the difference. This is a paper as example research in quasi-experimental design. You can access the articles in our modules. There's a link to the PDF embedded in the content page, page 4 of this module. So you can take a look at the example articles to get an understanding of what kind of research could be considered as a quasi-experimental research design. A sample research question in that paper is, to what degree are elementary gifted students' understandings of science process skills impacted by participation in STEM intervention? So this kind of research where it's looking for kind of cause and effect, see how effective an intervention is, and to identify the direct relationship between the intervention and the dependent outcome variable. This is what we consider as experimental design. For most of other research where intervention is not conducted, there's no treatment control group, usually we are looking for correlations between the variables instead of a cause and effect direct relationship. This is a big difference between experimental research and non-experimental research. And in this kind of experimental design, pre-test, post-test is also very often used. And when you use pre-test and post-test, the tests administered pre and post should be the same, and it also should be administered to the same group of participants. And usually we will use pair sample t-test to analyze this kind of design. The third type of experimental research is single subject experimental research design. This kind of design allows a researcher to test the effect of an intervention or on a single individual or a set of individuals who are considered as one group. So if you work with special needs kids, usually you might have fewer, smaller sample size, and single subject experimental research becomes very handy in that case. And on the in the module content, I have a link where you can, read further more if you're interested in particular single subject experimental research. For non-experimental research, depending on the types of research, the types of research is depending on the purpose of the research. It might be as simple as describing the characteristic of a group of participants, examine the differences or similarities between variables. However, this is usually this descriptive is usually very basic in a research design. It doesn't tell us much about what predicts what, so it's just really descriptive in the nature, and often used as a preliminary analysis, or you might have a more complex design, but descriptive is a one way you begin with talking about your study, your results. However, I do have one paper that's using some national data where people published on the policy analysis with regards to NCLB, high stakes testing, student achievement. You can take a look at that paper if you're interested in seeing how descriptive analysis is being used in research. The second type of research is correlation. Usually the correlation is the examination of the strength between two variables or more variables. Data can be collected through the use of questionnaire interviews, or you can measure with any kind of instrument. For example, it could be, looking at correlation between teachers' years of experience with their job satisfaction or their teaching effectiveness, identifying the correlation relationship between two variables. And however, please remember, this is the correlation and association. It's not cause and effect. Prediction analysis, where you will have you will be exploring the relationship between independent variable and dependent variables, where you have an independent variable, for example, students' prior achievement, to try to predict their post-achievement. Explanatory, usually it's looking at the relationship among a set of variables, such as students' motivation, how that influences their achievement. Also, depending on the time and space you use to design your study, we may call your study as cross-sectional or time series longitudinal. For cross-sectional, it's a study that conducted at only one time point, but with different group of students, different schools, different states. We call it cross-sectional. For time series longitudinal is where you have data collected in multiple time points, and it can become, and from the same group of participants, this can be considered as longitudinal. So this is a quick overview of type of quantitative research. Of course, each of the methods is very there's a lot of things we can talk about, but this is just an overview, and I would recommend you to read further on the links I provided in the module and read the papers embedded in the module as well to get more familiar with the type of research in quantitative research design. Thank you for listening to the presentation. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions through email or through our discussion board.